This video is sponsored by AlphaDraft, where you can play fantasy esports such as Dota2. We have numerous tournaments there. See the link below in the description box if you'd like to play through my referral link. Now, esports, this might sound like a hyperbolic statement, but there's definitely a pattern. There's definitely a trend behind it. Esports, in a sense, is run. The tempo of the scene is dictated by what I would describe as troublesome teenagers. And the reason I specifically say troublesome teenagers is because I don't want to just paint all teenagers as being a certain way and being moody or being prone to erratic behavior or volatile in their emotional state or run by hormones or whatever. Because if you are a teenager, and especially if you're not like that, that's such a tiresome thing for someone to say, to kind of judge you by your age and assume a level of maturity, etc., etc. But you can obviously see that within a certain demographic of teenagers, some are less mature than others, literally just by age sometimes, and even in life experience or how they've processed what's happened to them in their lives, how they've been able to adapt to the situations they're in. Some are less reflective. These are patterns, trends that we see, and especially people who've been through teenage periods in their life, puberty, etc. They've come into being a young adult, then becoming an older adult, becoming an adult full stop. You see the progression of life and the lessons that you have to learn, and they don't always match up on the years, but there's a time period that it takes for some of these processes to decompress, to fully work themselves out. And so you see as you go through that metamorphosis, okay, I can see where I've grown here, and where before, even though at the time I might have thought I was quite mature, I might have known about the world, actually I didn't know a lot, and I definitely learned things later, and there was things that were misconceptions on my part, or I perceived things a different way. And as you grow and you reflect, you come to these realizations, but it's difficult when you're in that position without the life experience, without going through the situations, to understand that that's the case. It's sort of like being stuck in a certain environment, like being a fish in water and not knowing what water is. Until you could be in an environment that was different from that, you wouldn't understand even what it is in its absence or in itself. One of the reasons why this is such a big problem in the West is that in the Western culture in general, there is actually a large trend to where, to a degree, talent, aptitude for something, proficiency, is allowed to run things. And the reason why I say to a degree is because it's not entirely. Like, if you really do go way out of whack, like then no matter how good you are, there'll be a backlash against that. But if you're vaguely within normal bounds of reasonable behavior and you're not making too crazy demands, then the more talent you have, the more crazy the demands you can make, and the more slightly unreasonable your behavior can become within those bounds. And as a result, people who are very successful, whatever, Hollywood stars, musicians, people who are sports stars, these people get away with a lot more. And it's only when they go really out of bounds, in theory, that the public really clamps down on them, then there's a backlash against them, and then they're brought into bounds. This is actually, in many senses, a very Western philosophy. If you experience certain cultures in the East, it's not necessarily that way, just in terms of talent. And so in the West, I think it's often thought of as though talent is balanced against, like, having to do things you don't want to do. So the more talented you are, the less things you have to do that you don't want to do, which normally in societal bounds. And not only does that mean you get to do a job that a lot of people can't do, because you're capable of it, but as a result, people are sort of give up some of these things and say, okay, you don't necessarily have to do that because this guy is like so good at acting or such a good, we'll let him get away with these things. And so it's almost like that's part of your reward for being so good. It's not just the money and the fame, etc. You're getting some of these perks, as it were. And so the topic that's brought all of this to mind, because it's something I've often thought about, I've spoken about on many shows, but what's brought a lot of this to head is some recent drama in Dota2. Now, for anyone who doesn't know the Dota2 scene, I'll give you a brief overview of this, but I'm assuming people know at least the basics. And so just think of this as an overview of the case. So we're putting together the details to then examine. And it's not just going to be an examination of this Dota 2 case. I'm going to set that up initially to preface a more general discussion about teenagers, about esports, about what a young scene it is and the way that we react to things, and then the public reaction to this teen drama that occurs, okay? So essentially within Dota 2, there are two key players that are the protagonists of this particular story. There's RTZ, former star player of Secret and previously a star player of Evil Geniuses. And where we start in his story is he used to be the main star player of Evil Geniuses, and he's considered the best player in the world by some people. A lot of people had him as the best Western player, definitely the best position, best 1 or 2 position player. A lot of people had him at this kind of high level, very, very talented player, just a phenomenal, like a prodigiously gifted player at Dota 2, quite clearly. Now, last year, he left Evil Geniuses, the team he was a part of, despite having a lot of success, top 4 places all over the place, even using a stand-in, they were able to accomplish this, and a stand-in for one of their carry roles. Despite all this success, placing top 4 TI4, top 3, I think it was 3rd place actually. He leaves this team, Evil Geniuses. That's why all this success, wonderful organization, lots of money, great teammates, a lot of positives going forwards to the future, even the great placing, and you're going to get your real lineup back. He leaves the team and decides to go and join this team Secret. Now, Secret was billed as a kind of Western super team. It was members of other teams that had left, Na'Vi, Fnatic, these teams that had left and joined their own team, and they'd made it, and the idea was for players, it's going to be a player's paradise. Okay, we're not going to put up with like not getting as much salary or much value as we're worth. All interesting and salient points, by the way, that have their own merits to them. And they make this team, and so he's a late joiner to this. RTZ comes in with Zai from Evil Geniuses, the 2 of the best players in Evil Geniuses, to support the carry. They come over and they join up with Team Secret, and now Team Secret looks even more like the super team, because it's got S4, who's in Alliance, it's got Kuroki, who was in Na'Vi, it's got Poppy, who's like the genius drafter of Na'Vi, now it's got Zai, who was the support, and it's now going to be offlane, now it's got Arteezy, who's like considered the kind of gem within the Western scene amongst like the star players, so now it's really going to be the super team, right? And now any problems anyone had in the past team, it's going to go great, right? So now let's talk about Kuroki. Kuroki was a founding member of Secret, but before that, he was in Na'Vi. He was playing a different role in Na'Vi. Then in Na'Vi, he had plenty of success as well. Top 4s all over the places, winning LANs all the time, seemingly. Just here every month, winning LANs, winning online tournaments in Dota 2. Even coming top 2 at the International 3 after like a lower bracket run. Almost winning the Aegis. He wasn't in the Na'Vi team that did win the Aegis years before. Then they did drop off a little bit afterwards, and he left. And the team started to nosedive the year later, and he left, and he formed Secret, actually, along with Poppy, S4. They make this team, and now we get to the point where Secret's together as a lineup. So because now, especially in this Arteezy era, there's these star quality names at like every position, and just the history behind the players, and just the scrutiny that you've got so many stars means it's going to be like a boom or bust scenario. You're either going to have a lot of success, or it's not going to last long enough, because if people don't have success when they're this quality of player with the history they have, they're going to leave and go somewhere else. Someone else is going to give that talent an offer, or they're going to get sick of it and they're going to go elsewhere. Well, early on, it actually wasn't going that great. This team, for a normal team, they were having good results. They were getting top 4s, some seconds sometimes, getting close to winning. But for a team with those expectations, it's really to win and to become the best in the West, and definitely the best in the West, if not the best in the world. These are the real expectations for what you're doing by making a super team like that. And it happened eventually. They managed to come by the summer. Everything kicked into gear. They overtook Vici as the best team. They won 4 straight LANs in a row. They were handedly beating the overall field, and even close opponents who could play them close, they would routinely be able to get those wins off them. They were beating all their rivals from all over the world, Chinese teams, Western teams. They just had everyone's number. The meta was all set around what they were able to do. They looked like the best team. They went into the International 5 as the favourites. People were thinking, this team can win. They should win. They've got all the pieces to win. They've got all these star players. Everything's firing. People are calling different players in the team the best in the world. People are performing incredibly at every position within the lineup. Everything looks set. And so these expectations are huge. And remember, some of these players have been in the final of an international or been top 3 international. So for them, again, it's you have to win the international. That's like everything's on this. They don't do it. And not only don't they do it, they flop. So even though they did really well in the group stage, they didn't lose a single series there. They just tied some of them. They get out, and they end up finishing only 7th to 8th. And what's more, not just 7th to 8th, which isn't even close to the expectations of this team, or the histories of what these players have already accomplished separately, but even worse, they finished 7th to 8th, and they only lost 2 series in the whole tournament, the 2 series that lost their tournament lives. And these were both to teams who weren't a legit favourite to win the whole tournament, and not only weren't legit favourites, were like sort of underdog wins. underdog upsets over Secret, but were also teams who themselves didn't even crack the top 4. So it's not like you could lose to VP, but then they went on some miracle run, placed second, and you were like, wow, they figured something out about the meta, and this one player went super god mode for the whole time. Not really. They had a nice run, and they had some nice upsets themselves, but these teams, eHome and Virtus.pro, they didn't turn out to be the elite level teams in the world, and they didn't have like the C-Deck run, So that added into the bad placing means it's very hard to feel good about that tournament. And then when you look at the performances of the players in this tournament, realistically you can only say that like 2 of the 5 players in Secret played well. Like Arteezy played very well. He played a tournament performance that, with the other players playing as they had been a month prior, hey, maybe could have made the final of the tournament. He was very good actually. Then you have Zai, and he was playing fucking unreal. One of the best players in the whole tournament. And this is a guy who used to be a support. Now he's playing this off lane, and he's fucking really good at it. And there's times where Arteezy was just playing a very consistently high level, but Zai, sometimes it was almost just like he was the guy where he was losing and he was almost mad at that, and he was like, get on my back, everyone, and he was doing everything he could. So you can understand the frustration for these 2 players when things go badly, that like, you did really awesome, you came in with all these expectations, the team was working so well for those past tournaments, working against every kind of opponent, no matter what continent they're from, everything was in place, and not only did you not succeed, it's not like you made top 4 but you just got pipped at the post, or you lost to like LGD had a sick series versus you, or ED just narrowly got past you. No. You only lost to teams that in theory weren't even considered elite contenders. And you didn't even get a chance to really match up against those top teams and show like, oh, we still were good, etc. Everything's gone totally wrong. So obviously there's going to be some underlying frustration there. So what happens in the order of events is, after TI5, as often happens, there's a shuffle where any of the teams, in fact, sometimes even the team who wins will tend to change players, as happened this time and has happened in the past. So EG, who won the event, Arteezy's former team, Arteezy, somehow there's contact between them. Secret's having issues, obviously. Arteezy goes back, rejoins Evil Geniuses. Evil Geniuses kick out their 4-player, the support player, OE. I can't remember how Americans say it. That's how I always say it, OE. And, oh yeah, this is what happens next. So he's rejoined Evil Geniuses, and that's not it though. That in itself, by the way, was huge drama. A guy who's just won the tournament's been kicked instantly. They've brought back the guy who before was considered like someone who's possibly was one of the problems with the team that they had before, and then he's left over some internal issues. So Arteezy then sort of really kicks off the flame aspect of it, fuels the fire, or creates the fire in some sense, by doing streaming and alluding to the fact that someone within Secret was kind of like to blame for the problems in the team and part of the reasons why there was failures there. Because even though a bunch of the players played underperformed, he's kind of citing it as though like it's one person's attitude set someone off, and then someone else wasn't comfortable as well, and then someone was pissed off and someone didn't like him, and all these aspects like that. And the problem is, he initially just alludes to it, so that in theory, if you didn't know who it was, you could just kind of guess, oh, who does he mean out those teammates? But then the problem is, he does that classic thing that people sometimes do. I don't know if he did this intentionally initially, but he sort of narrows it down, person by person, giving compliments, till he may as well have just said from the beginning, it's this person, I don't like him, I think they did this, problem solved. Instead, because he's done it in this weird way, you're going to get to that point anyway. So he's saying this player is really good and I respect this guy, and I always thought this guy could be good in this situation, but that person tilted him in some sense. And so eventually it comes down to the fact that it's this guy Kuroki, the former Na'Vi player. And so what happens now after he's made these statements is the Western Dota 2 community, mainly people on Reddit, just gets sucked into Arteezy's drama vortex. He's one of the masters of, I think, partially intentionally, but also there's a component that's unintentional. It's just who he is as a person. He's created, the scene gets sucked into it willingly. In fact, some people eagerly just salivating, delicious drama. They all go into it. And then what happens is, in this sort of a scenario, people start to make speculations off that, and they start to take even the little nuggets of drama, the morsels they've gotten, and they start to go even further and make hypothesize what might be happening and speculate further and extrapolate what could have happened, and they start examining old interviews and footage and looking for someone who, what hand movement was that, what does that correspond to, and and remember this vague allusion this other teammate said before 2 years earlier, maybe that ties into this, and make it just going super deep into this stuff in a very short amount of time actually. Now here's where part of the problem comes out, because then Kuroki, the other player, Now, if he's a younger guy, if he's just a different guy, if it's a different game even, maybe he comes out and he responds in like manner, in similar kind, and says, oh, you're an asshole, or does this, or maybe this is the reason why, or you're the toxic one, or whatever. Instead, he doesn't do that. In fact, here's the interesting thing. The response that Kuroki had, in a sane world of adults, would actually be like the end. That would be like the end of the conversation. Because what his statement's essentially done is it's this very measured, reflective, reasonable statement where he tries to empathize with Arteezy's position repeatedly, even keeps telling people, like, don't blame this guy, I understand where he's coming from, he's a young guy, he's very emotional, he's prone to these outbursts, he's had issues, but at the same time, you've got to understand where he's coming from, he's a young guy, he's got all this fame, this money, he's very talented, and so as a result, he's in this unique position, and he's struggling to cope with it. I've been in a similar position myself when I was younger. As you grow older, as you learn how to handle it more. Okay, my situation was different. And he makes this statement that actually is an incredibly adult, very mature way of stating the situation, okay? And actually diffuses a lot of the situation, I think, if you're a reasonable, neutral observer. Now, of course, with the sort of scene that we're in, people take offense to that, immediately kind of draw lines in the sand that you have to be on this side or that side. You either think this guy's good and the other one's an asshole, or this guy's totally reasonable and the other one's a total asshole. They start to join factions where they're attacking the other person and they're breaking down those statements even more. And it basically descends into sort of like a teenage high school drama, which is very immature, very childish on the community's part. I'm talking here, we're not even addressing the players right now. I mean, a reasonable response in a lot of these scenarios would be to think something like, okay, maybe these people are just frustrated right now. Maybe they're a little bit angry. Maybe in 2 weeks, maybe in a month, they'll regret some of the things they said, or maybe they'll think better of it and think, okay, maybe I was just saying that at the time to justify the fact I was upset about what happened there, or I was too close to the situation. I need to get some time apart to really understand that, like, okay, I played a part in this role. I fucked up in this way as well. Instead, people's response is to just blow it up even further, and suddenly they're judging people, and then they're drawing conclusions, and then they're taking tiny things that person said and going crazy with it and just going completely out, rather than think like, I don't know the situation, I'm not involved in the situation, I shouldn't actually have a personal investment myself. I might like this player, but it doesn't mean I'd have to dislike this player because he doesn't like him or whatever. Instead, it's never like that. I mean, it's like that old Doug Stanhope joke that he once saw a poll that was like, oh, what do you think the chances are? I think this is in like 2007 or something. What do you think the chances are of there being a major terrorist attack on a major sporting event in this year? And he said, like, maybe 50% of the poll was like, yeah, definitely happen. Maybe like 40% was like, reasonable, not sure. And then maybe like 8% was like, not that likely. And his joke was like, that pie chart of percent of people who were answering should have been 99% like, I don't know, like, I don't have enough information. And his joke was like, unless you literally knew like some terrorist guy was like your roommate and you overheard him, how could you even speculate on that? You couldn't really. I mean, all you could do is speculate. You would never say like, I know there is, or it's very likely. I mean, you would have no grounds to reasonably make this. It'd be a ridiculous. And yet most people showing a willingness to express quite an extreme, very concrete opinion, as if they had factual basis, and this was even a tangible subject you could have the facts and the truth on, and the right style. All the ways people phrase it is really telling of the way that they think of stuff. Because when you're talking about an argument between two people and the way they've communicated things and maybe misinterpreted, or there's been miscommunication, or they've taken extreme views, there's not really going to be any truth or a right side or someone who's right and someone who's wrong and this guy's great and this guy's an asshole. It's very murky grey area, and odds are, by the way, we as the public, think about the very little information we've got already in the crazy angles, the spectrum of responses. It's very likely we're ever going to get to whatever truth you could even assess in that situation. I don't think it's even helpful to think of it as truth in that situation. I'm more interested, as much as I'm not particularly in drama, just to know what causes people to get to us. Like, the most interesting question to me is, how does a team go from being the best in the world, winning 4 lands in a row, to this situation where people are making out like they could have never played with this guy and one asshole, it was always a powder keg and I could never get along with it. Meanwhile, TI didn't always have to go this way. It could have gone very differently. They could have placed 4th. They could have had a 6th run a second. Who knows? They could have come along and won it just as they had been in that form before. It's not like it always had to be this way. It was like a movie that had to play out that way. That's what it means unreasonable. Yet that's not the way people are thinking. Instead, it's about this whole thing, this very personal drama of deciding who's right, deciding who's wrong. So when people are trying to figure all this stuff out, well, there's a lot of problems in this situation, isn't there? So Arteezy has a history, as is alluded to in Kuroki's thing, of statement of venting on Twitter, on his stream, giving his real talk as if he's giving the inside story. And the worst thing about giving the inside story to people like that is that they'll never take it as, right, I have his inside story and his perception of things. They take that as like, oh, since I like him, I've now got the truth. Like, he told the truth and the other guy was lying. Like, well, maybe the other guy has a different perception of it. Remember, there isn't truth in this scenario. Like, have you guys ever read any philosophy? There's very few fucking universal truths or facts in the actual world, you know. Like, it's like that great Nietzsche quote. What is it? Something along the lines of like that there are no facts, only interpretations. Like, yeah, in a strict mathematical sense, you might be able to get to some sort of a fact. But even then, because it's mathematics, it will be quite abstract to application in your life and the experience of your reality. What you experience is very much going to be interpretations of your sense organs, your brain, your experiences, your culture, the programming of your life, experiences you've had with other people, your emotional state at that point in time, how much food you've had, how much sleep you've had, so many things. There's very little truth to be had in this world. So anyway, here's one of the problems with this scenario. Like I said, there is this baseline that Arteezy is someone who tends to react emotionally in quite an erratic fashion. As in, he can just react this way now, and then suddenly an hour later it's not as bad, and then a day later it's even worse, and then someone says this, and suddenly he blows up, or sometimes it's just not that big of a deal, and it's so hard to he runs so hot and cold, it's hard to get a gauge on how he's thinking or what state of mind he's in when he makes certain statements. And there's a past of this that goes beyond this player. So we've seen in the past the ways he expressed himself when he was in Evil Geniuses, even in the team, and then after Evil Geniuses, and then responding to former Evil Genius members or how he thought of the scenario then, and now that he's leaving Secret, suddenly how he thinks of the Secret members, and now when he reflects on his time at ESG and he sees the problems he had, etc. Well, suddenly, this isn't that long ago. It's not like it was 10 years ago. He couldn't see some of these issues before, and suddenly these weren't an issue. You can see that this is a guy who's all over the place. It's very difficult to get a read on him in a real sense, and to get a sense that he himself has a read on himself. So it feels like he's changing all the time. So there's that. There's then the factor that when he left EG, they'd been having a lot of success. This is a team that they'd placed top 3 at TI4. They'd had all these great wins at LANs, even after TI. They'd had all the top 4s, all the seconds, all these great placings, and yet why did they break up? It wasn't because there was skill issues here and we have to replace this person. It was due to internal issues, and he was one of the reasons. Some sort of clashing with certain players, ideologically or attitude-wise. I just didn't want to play with that guy anymore, thought pastures were greener elsewhere. So separate to KuroKy, he's had his own history of drama and history of reacting in this kind of a fashion in the past. There's a track record there. But at the same time, as I explain this is why I want to make the point that it's ridiculous to think that either of these people are the super asshole, either of them is so extreme, or either of them are only ones to blame and others to not. That it's very likely that there's a mixture of both. It's true there could be more on one side, but it's very likely each has a part to play, not least because the history doesn't really make sense if it's so extreme like that. Because if Arteezy's the super asshole, and he's totally uncontrollable, he can't do it, and he blows up off absolutely everything, then how do they have all this success in EG? What, are they all just saints that they could put up with this? It's very unlikely. It's also very unlikely they had that level of success if it really was so crazy. I'd imagine it was like that every now and then, and they kept it together, and even if there was some issues, he thought, right, this is still a good team, and we had good results, and I think I can beat that guy next time. And they kept it together, and they were winning, and things were going well, and they were having good placings, and then eventually it just got to some point where on that day or that week, somehow it just couldn't be held together enough. Like, it was almost there, and then it just supernovaed at the last second. And now later on, like less than a year later, he's already back in the same team again, and he's already back in a position where now it's not as big an issue. So you can see it wasn't even big an issue then as it seemed. We've now found out with different circumstances and more time to reflect on it. Well, that's the problem. Likewise, let's go over to the side of KuroKy and examine the same scenario. So if he was, as people try to suggest, like some sort of calculated, conceited asshole who's just like almost like a Patrick Bateman-esque in his ability to put on this visage to the world that he is one way when internally he's another way, and he's always been this toxic asshole, and the way he's passive-aggressively demanding. This is the way other people characterize him, by the way, not me. The way they put him like that, you'd imagine that, Havost kind of suggested he was the problem in Na'Vi, and I bet they didn't even like him anyway, etc. First of all, remember, he formed Secret with someone who was in Na'Vi, who was one of the people who was Na'Vi in that sense. So, okay, that doesn't exactly line up. Secondly, even when he was in Na'Vi, it's like people almost only remember he was in the latter period of Na'Vi where they didn't have the success, like the last few months. No, he was in the Na'Vi also. That was right up there with Alliance. It's like they were trading lands back and forwards. They were playing each other all the time, battling back and forwards record. made it to the final of TI, had won numerous lands, numerous online competitions, had shown himself to be a good player in his position, shown a lot of positive signs, seemed to get along, had one of the best Na'Vi synergies. Obviously, like, it's a different world when you're talking the original ones, but had this great synergy where they could have these crazy comebacks and they could play off each other so well and find a way to win. It doesn't work, the idea that he was like that as well. Both of these people separately have smaller similar issues, but they're also having incredible success. It's also working really well, which ties into a classic esports problem, which is where, because, especially in the case of RTZ, these are teenagers or young adults. I mean, Kuroki's only something like 22. That's still pretty young, mate. There's things you find out. I mean, I'll give my example. I won't say everyone finds out. Things I didn't find out when I was 25, 26, that now I realize, like, I didn't understand that there was more to this process, or I kind of hadn't allowed myself to develop in that particular way. And so to think to back to 22 and 19 or whatever these guys are, they're all young guys at this point in time, okay? So I think everyone, to a degree, blows these things out of proportion in these particular cases, because the idea that they had all this overwhelming success and they did work. Listen, no matter what someone tells you verbally, like, and I never liked that guy and I never got along with him with all these problems, who gives a fuck? In game, it was money. Na'Vi was money. EG was fucking amazing, that team. Even when they had to stand in, they could make it work, have really good results. These are teams which the synergy in the game tells you these players did synergize well, did get along. Now, whether they got along personally, okay, we can believe their testimony and say that they did or they didn't, okay. I think a lot of that's the stuff that's blown out of proportion, and it worked in game to a degree that usually isn't going to be the case if you could characterize these people in such extreme terms as they now are doing to each other. I also think that because people take these tiny things and blow them way out of proportion, this is a classic esports case of where people get the cart before the horse. So what happens is, once they lose, they say, well, the reason we lost was we have these problems, like attitude problems, or this guy's just not good enough, etc. No. Usually it's the other way around. What happens is, okay, it's possible him not playing well might be the reason you lose, but it tends to be the case, from my experience, that's the way of justifying it to yourself. What happens is, once you lose, that causes the attitude problems, that causes the conflicts. Because when you're winning, when those conflicts are there, sometimes you think, it's not a regular problem, and who cares, it's working in game and all that sort of thing. That might have been there the whole time. It might even have been as bad. But when you lose, that's kind of the fuel to really make it go into supernova, make the fire just get completely out of control, where you can't just put it out with a little bit of time apart, or one person talking to this faction and the other one talking to that guy in their team and getting over it that way. Now there's got to be that conflict because you're not winning. And because now, the key thing is usually when it's like a defining loss, like you lost to this one opponent way too many times, and so that makes you, one guy who's in the team who before was able to put up with it because he was like, we'll work through this problem. Now he's like, am I ever going to beat that guy? Like, do I have to change teams to win? Am I not going to win the big championship I want? And so obviously in this particular case, we've seen in the case of Arteezy, maybe it's like a TI issue. TI is so important to him that if he doesn't win, now that's the big blow-up point. And admittedly, in this particular case, people had played poorly, whereas actually in EG, they'd played pretty well at the TI, that they didn't win. So I always say that I have this rule. I can't remember where I heard it. I'm pretty sure it's like a sports rule as well. I've heard somewhere before. At least I've repeated it so many times that it is in my mind, which is that you never break up a winning lineup until you know it can't win anymore. Key part of that phrase is anymore. As in, just because you had a winning lineup, okay, so it's like one of the classic Na'Vi lineups or NIP in CSGO, just because you have a classic lineup doesn't mean because it won in the past you should keep together and it'll definitely win now. Personnel might not be as good anymore relative to the rest of the scene and relative to their own history. You might not fit the meta, might not have the right setup, might not have the right approach, might not have the right personalities anymore as you've developed as people. But if it's the case that, okay, you were like winning like 2 months ago, or you're winning 2 tournaments ago, or you showed signs recently where give it 2 more tournaments and you might win again, that's where it's almost criminal, I think, to break lineups up. That's where it should not happen. Now, it's okay to change a lineup if you need to change the lineup to get back to success or to improve or to fit a new meta. These are all good reasons to. But in general, you should try and get a gauge on whether the team can and will win anymore. And if it doesn't, that's when you know it's time to go. Even if it's actually an awesome team at that point, all fits together, it feels. That's when it might be time to go in terms of these moves. I mean, I'll give a contrast before I go into the more general point of the reason why this doesn't happen in Korean esports. So in StarCraft 2 and in League of Legends, you don't get these problems where these young, talented teenage or young adults are able to just run riot over things and have the whole scene dance to their tune and leave one team, join another team, kick this guy from a team, like cause conflict here, have success here, but then the next month leave the team, even though the team could have had more success. The reason why you don't get that happen in Korean esports is because of two factors, and they basically both come from the history of how Korea is a society. So within Korean society, it's very important that you understand where you are within the hierarchy of whatever construct you're within at that point in time. So if it's in a family, understanding that your parents, you have to be respectful to them and speak to them in a certain way and obey them to a degree. And your boss, you speak to him in a very respectful manner. And there's a certain kind of spectrum of how you can behave, and his is much wider, and he can behave in certain ways that you can't and say things that you can't, etc. And so within this hierarchy, it's always understood where you fit within it. And just because you're like talented or successful or whatever doesn't mean you get to skip to the top of the hierarchy and run everything. Actually, the person who's older than you, who's your boss, who's brought you in, who's hired you, will always maintain a certain level of authority over you and a certain level of control, and you always have to show that respect. The fact that you're brilliant, or even maybe the star earner at the company or the star player on a team, doesn't mean you get to like kick people out and you get to take the top spot in the hierarchy and tell that guy what to do and just threaten to leave, etc. And this is enforced by the culture, and not just within teams. Like if you leave that team, they kick you or whatever. Now maybe in other teams, some teams won't take you in because of that, because they'll be like, well, he won't fit into our structure. He doesn't obey authority. He doesn't respect his teammates. And there's even the factor, this might sound alien to Westerners, but if you join a team there's a great example, okay, in League of Legends that happened, where a guy joined who was a rookie. He'd only started playing League of Legends 6 months before. It's called Shy. He's a top player, and he joined, at the time, was one of the best Korean teams. And it became the best as he joined, which was Azubu Frost. And this team won the domestic championship and made it to the final of the world championship, and he was the star player of it. He very quickly developed into the best in the world at his role, one of the greatest of all time, and he was one of the main stars of his team. Yet despite all this success, he was always still the rookie in the team. The others were veterans, they'd been around longer, they were older than him, they'd accomplished more than him. He wasn't allowed to just run riot over them. I mean, he wouldn't particularly have. But in that scenario, in the West, at this point in time, especially once he's made himself enmeshed into the team and he's a star and he's giving you the success, now he would get to have a lot of say over things. And he could have if he was an emotional guy and he was erratic in this sense, he could really disrupt the team. No. It's understood for a guy like that these people brought me in, the structure existed before I was here, we achieved success as a team. Within the team, I play a very important role. I'm the star, but my job is to be the star. I'm just doing my duty, what I'm supposed to do, which is be a star, contribute more, get kills, carry the team. This other guy over here is the support. He's not some shitter because he's the support and he's not as good as me. He's not as good as me, yeah, okay, but his job isn't to be as good as me. Maybe he's the janitor type player who's supposed to do things to help me. And so I know that my success also comes in part because he helps me. And so the whole structure is maintained and works in that sense. And that's why you don't have these problems. You look in the history of StarCraft 2, Brood War, League of Legends, you don't see it in the Korean scene. I won't speak to Dota 2 because it's a very different scene. They don't have the same player base and same structural hierarchy overlaid on the top of it. Now, as a general point, now that I've addressed the Asian side, when I'm going to talk about the esports industry now, people wonder, they often comment on it and they often are exasperated as if like, oh, why is there so much drama in the scene? Well, first of all, drama, let's be real, drama comes from the pro players, not from the public. And what I mean by that is, yes, there'll be occasional cases where the public can take something and really go out of back with it when there wasn't anything, but most of the drama starts with the players, them saying something, doing something, reacting in a certain way. Then the public take that and they do fuel it. They do blow it up beyond that. It's like they take the baton and they just run 3/4 of the lap instead of just running a quarter or whatever it is. I guess that doesn't make sense. You run one lap and then they run 3, don't you? Whatever, you run 3 laps instead of 1. So this is partly because of their seemingly insatiable appetite for drama, but it obviously couldn't exist initially without the pro players. And so that's pro players leaking shit to friends, or friends who then leak it, or leaking it directly, or speaking out in a very affrontish manner. attacking others, former teammates, people they don't like, blaming others, BMing others. Now listen, I like shit talking. I think it's fun as long as you kind of understood that this is what we're doing. I even like rivalries where you kind of like, you hate those guys, you talk against them. So I don't mind this stuff. It's more the way people then go a bit too far with some of this shit, and they take it as like real life, and they start making crazy decisions about someone's life and making really bizarre statements about someone, you know. Whereas I'm not into that. That's why you notice in this video, even as I address some of these issues, I've never made this about who do I believe. Is it Kuroki or RT? Which one has the truth? Neither have the truth, mate. In fact, I'm not even interested in that topic because it's a futile quest. So also, I'm not in a position to judge these people. I'm not trying to. I'm a neutral party. I'm not in any way connected to either. I have no emotional investment in what I think. I'm just interested in knowing what's going to happen in their careers. Could they have played together? What made the best team in the world suddenly become a team that couldn't even place top 4 within the span of a few weeks? These are the more pertinent questions to me, as in things related to the in-game shit, which is really the important part about esports, right? So, part of the problem that stems from where the drama stems from in this sense, why the players are so involved with it, is that the majority of the players, nearly all of them in fact, are these young guys who are teenagers or they're young adults. I mean, these are the most talented people in the scene. You occasionally get some who aren't, but even then, you notice a lot of those are in more supportive roles, or they're veterans who aren't considered the main star, and they're not involved in the drama as much. I mean, in gaming terms, for pro gamers, once you're about 23, that's considered old at this point in time. Like, I think about 22 and up is considered old, even though obviously in real life terms, that's ridiculous. It's still very young. I mean, again, from my own life, I could tell you shit that I did when I was 25 that seems incredibly immature, very young, and I obviously had tons to fucking learn. I wasn't some veteran or old man of the scene or something. That's not the case at all. Not only are these people young, but they're inexperienced. I mean, typically, yeah, they've been playing a while to become a pro. It's kind of a myth in general that you can start playing and within a year you'll be a pro player. That happens very rarely. Those are real prodigious talents. A lot of them have been playing 4 or 5 years since they were a younger teen anyway. And then they get their breakthrough, usually around like 18 to 20. So they're young, they're inexperienced. There's also not like a linear curve. It's not like it goes like level 1 of being a good player. Here's this much fame and money, and then level 2 is like twice as much. And that it's almost like the curve just suddenly goes up. So you don't get a proper ramp up to dealing with fame, the money you can earn, the potential to earn more money, the power that you have over teams in terms of kicking players, having your say in a team, disobeying people, sabotaging the structure, getting attention from the public, getting people to love you, getting people to hate other people. There's all these aspects to learn and to become enmeshed in. They have no experience in. And so as a result, a lot of these people, when they don't know what they're doing, yeah, they're just wildly pushing buttons and just lashing out and doing whatever and learning on the fly and then forgetting that lesson that they thought they'd learned. And one day they're a reasonable person and they're unreasonable. And so they're reacting publicly, they're reacting emotionally, there's a very exaggerated manner compared to things that actually in real terms are quite small. I mean, this is one of the biggest problems here. That's why I said about teams where they can be champions one day, they can be the best team in the world one day. 2 weeks later, suddenly they're all assholes and they hate each other the whole time and it was never going to work. This is immature. Forget the words that they're saying. Just look at the way they're putting together their argument and how unreasonable it is on the surface and how very unlikely it is that all these teams have these crazy personalities that couldn't get along before. Whereas they were getting along fine before. They were getting along okay in a reasonable manner that you would in a job. This is one of the problems, is that it's blown up so far. And so these minor disagreements in real world terms become these fucking anime-esque feuds and hatreds. It's a fucking fly in my face. Where it's as if like these grudges will be held forever and I fucking hate that guy. What an asshole, a piece of shit. You don't know what deceitful, conceited motherfucker, sociopathic guy. Like the most ridiculous terms. Like, you know, in real life, you know how few assholes and bad guys there actually are in the scene. There's people who just have little confrontations. And sometimes, I've said this myself, I can be friends with 2 people and they have this massive beef. And it's like, I know both of them. I know you're just on the different wavelength. You don't get along in that sense. Or you did at one point in time, then this guy said the one thing that triggers you. And then you're the person that when someone triggers you in that sense, you go over the top here. And that guy's approach is to be passive aggressive and not acknowledge you. And like you can see from the outside how ridiculously infantile, how minuscule this real issue is. He really made a mountain out of a molehill. But to them, it's like the fucking end of the world. Except, of course, when a few months later, you know, it's all fixed up and they can join the same team, they can rejoin a team, etc. Suddenly, it was never that big a deal, was it? You get over it. Yet what's funny is in the moment, they just can't do that. They can't even see the scale of it. To them, it's so huge. There's also the issue, I mean, in this sense, these fucking feuds, it's like you could almost imagine it's a good job these guys exist now and play fucking professional video games. Because if these guys existed back in like fucking Napoleonic France in like the 17th century or whatever it was, they'd be like fucking challenging each other to like duels to the death over some slight in a fucking tavern somewhere, and then one of them is dead, or like with a lame leg or whatever the fuck you call it. That's how ridiculously out of control this shit is. Like, I have not had satisfaction, sir. I demand my honour be upheld. It's like, calm the fuck down. There's also the issue, unfortunately, that this stuff isn't going on in isolation. It's not just these two people battling at each time. The fame aspect, the public attention, just exacerbates this. And then people's overreaction to it exacerbates it further. And these mildly negative, just unproductive behaviour patterns, the problem is, not only do they get scrutinised so much, but in a weird way they get validated. Like suddenly, if you feel upset about it and you say something about it, now you can make the public hate that guy even more, and you feel like, oh, I did something good there, and people say they're on my side. And so in a horrible sense, it's like you've got a bunch of yes men around you, and you've got no men as well, but they're on the other, they're yes men for the other guy, you know. And so in a weird way, it validates and encourages this behaviour in a way that it shouldn't if it was a smaller scenario, and you had older people who could be like, listen, calm the fuck down, just go apart for a while, and then listen, I've talked to both of you, let's be reasonable, do this, etc. That can't happen. And now, because you have this public platform, you can get everyone's attention on this issue, including, by the way, the attention of the person who's fucked with you. You can get their attention in a public manner, where now they're like, what's he going to say about me? And it's causing this whole horrible feeling. It allows you to try and get revenge on that guy, to strike back at them, to fuck with somebody you think's treated you badly. It allows you also, regardless of how your argument with them goes and who has good points, you can now wage a PR war, where even if maybe you actually did something wrong or you did something fucked up, you can win or feel justified because you won the PR war. Everyone agreed that he was the asshole and I was on the right, and everyone likes me and everyone likes him. You know, this is ridiculous. Part of the reason, by the way, why this doesn't tend to happen as much in traditional sports is, first of all, similar to the Korean example I gave in esports. When you join a sports franchise as a young player, maybe you're very talented, you join a hierarchy. And you might have a star player, especially in real sports where the star players are like 28 to 30 when they're in their peak. He's going to be older than you. He's better than you, so you can't even use the talent excuse. And he's got more experience, and he's more well-versed. And because he's the star, he has more of the say over what happens. And you have to learn to get along with other people and learn to be the rookie and get hazed and go through that thing and become a bond with other members of the teammate, learn the value of other teammates. One of the reasons why star players, for example, in hockey and the NBA, become champions often tends to be not just that they max out their individual skill. They often do that quite early at 23, 24. But the next period, sort of 25 to 30 or so, tends to be the period where the star player now, he's maxed his own game out, he's keeping his game maintained at a high level. Now he has to learn how to use his teammates. That guy who before he thought was a shitter because that guy couldn't do what he wanted him to do, or let him down, or let a goal in, or didn't defend, he has to learn, I have to get that guy on my side. I have to learn how to work with him, how to make him better, because him becoming better then makes me seem better. I'm not actually better, but with the framework around me, now my impact of what I can do I can have a bigger impact, even though I'm not doing anything different. That's one of the things they learn. These young guys aren't learning that to the same degree. That's why they have a tendency to want to have star players and to cut people and to kick this guy who they think shit, who's actually like a linchpin type guy or a glue guy. That's why you see this happening. Not only that, when you join, you have the veterans who are the older guys who might not be as good anymore, but they've got all the experience and they've been around the block and they've seen other stars and they can tell you, hey, listen, I know this guy who was in your position before. When Michael Jordan was your age, he had these issues and here's what he did to overcome it. These guys, they drop science on you. They give you the knowledge. They give you the benefit of their life experience and the things they've seen and the things that they've done, and they keep you level-headed. You can have the vet that comes over to you and talks about, hey, young fella, like, listen, you're playing really awesome. I know you've got problems with that guy, but just leave it for the moment. Like, we'll figure it out as a team, and you know, you'll get on the same wavelength. You'll discuss it. Things will figure themselves out. There's also in real sports, most of the successful teams, they have that mentality where because they bond together and it's like them against the world. There's a keep it in the locker room mentality quite often. Now, that almost doesn't exist in esports. People keep it in the locker room right until they just get sick of someone and they're pissed off over something, and then boom, there we go, it's out there. And it's out there for everyone to see. Again, partly because they're so young. There's also the fact that in real sports, you have real coaches. There's a coach, there's the management, there's other players. All these people, when they're on the right page of trying to win and be as a team and win, they play a part in keeping it together and making sure little outbursts don't become massive things that tear a whole team apart. They can keep it in-house, they can fix it, they can respond to these things, they can separate people and work through an issue as a group and find solutions. In esports, things go so out of control in ridiculous fashion. I mean, we're talking like a single play can just tilt someone or make someone like, oh, I can never play with that guy again, look at that fucking mistake he did. A single game, you might have had an awesome series, but now this last game fucking blows it. I mean, obvious example with Kuroki, there's like that last game of TI3 where that was the perception by some of the Na'Vi players apparently that he fucked up the last game. The fucking rest of the series was fucking muddy as fuck, wasn't it? And the rest of the tournament where they come back from the lower bracket. A single series, if you lose that one big series to that opponent for the third straight time or whatever, a single tournament placing. Not winning TI, not even placing top 4 TI. There we go. That's something that could tilt them. In esports, these things are suddenly the end of the world. In real sports, sometimes you have to go years of not having the success before you decide, right, now's where I cut it off, or now's where I don't want to play with that person before. The scale is so much, in theory, it's so much smaller in terms of what's happening, but it's blown up to be so much bigger. It's like it's zoomed in and magnified more in esports. It also doesn't help the way the public respond to this shit. That's also helping and exacerbating and giving like negative, well, I guess positive reinforcement to negative or unproductive behaviors. So the problem is that the public consume this drama not as if they were watching a sport and they were trying to figure out what's going on here. They consume it like a soap opera, or as if they're watching WWE. It's like I always thought how ridiculous that men, or boys especially, would often look down on women and go, oh look, they watch those stupid soap operas. Who even fucking cares about that? And then they can watch WWE, which is just soap operas with people jumping on each other and doing pretend moves. Or they can follow sports and be all about, oh, and then this guy said that guy's shit, and oh, who do you think of this? It's the same fucking behaviour. It's the same human behaviour reflected in a male realm that the soap opera is. And so as a result, it doesn't even become about the sport. It's about the emotions and who's right and who's wrong and what's the public outrage and the outcry and what is the opinion, and I want to have my say and interact with the community. And this is one of the problems with the online community, because people get to interact in this sense. They can have a say. They can directly tell them, I say, you fucking asshole, you don't know what you're talking about. And plus, I think he's right anyway. I'm on Team Kuroki or whatever. Because they can do it this way. It becomes that sort of reality TV bullshit mentality where they're trying to vote people off the island because they don't like that guy. And I thought also that guy was an asshole. The scrutiny on this stuff is ridiculous. I mean, the level that people go into it, the judgment. First of all, why are people judging in this sense anyway? Like making final conclusion. Oh, I've lost all respect for that person because he just said like one thing you don't like. That's such a ridiculous overreaction, isn't it? So it's so out of proportion. It's not even justified anyway that you would be judging people in this sense or holding people to these insane standards because they're good at a fucking video game. There are so few real assholes in esports. Like the ones that I've met in my 15 plus years, they tend to be the real assholes are like the people who are the shady business guy that you don't even see. You never see him on camera. You never see his name. He owns the company that you'd only find out if you went and look it up and he did some dodgy thing here or he fucked someone out of some money here that was 6 months later so you never heard about the story. It's very rarely these guys. Some of them are like mildly antisocial, that's about it, or they don't get along with a certain sort of person, or if they're from other fucking countries, sometimes the culture clash is just there. People assume that there's none because we can all speak English. Well, in teams where they're all speaking English, that doesn't mean that there's no culture clash and that people aren't having they're not interpreting things differently with their local dictionary or their cultural dictionary when they think that they are both getting communication going between each other. I mean, one of the things about the whole public thing is just look on both sides. By the way, remember, there aren't only two sides, but that's what people create it into. It becomes where there's only you're on this side, that side. So on the side of the people who are against Arteezy, they think he's young, arrogant, cocky, whatever it may be, and these are all super negative qualities to them that are like literally worse than Hitler, etc. They're criticising every aspect of him and he's a total piece of shit, and they're using amateur psychology to study videos of what he's done and figure out why so, and it's all his fault, and oh, it's his fault that this other guy's got kicked, and they're going so deep on it. Well, then look at the other side. So, okay, now there's people who, what to me was a very reasonable statement by Kuroki that was kind of like, I'm not going to address any more of this. This is all I'm going to say. Let's leave it at that. People raging at this. Like, reacting almost as though he'd said more inflammatory shit than Arteezy. Like, the way they raged really betrayed what they wanted from the situation, not what he said. It wasn't about what he said, it's about what their reaction to it and what they wish he'd said. It was almost like this childish thing of like, he isn't giving us the drama that we demand. He won't play by our rules. Punish him. He loses the duel. You have lost. You must be a piece of shit. And stuff like, because he doesn't address some drama. Oh, look, he refuses to openly shame his teammate and tell her everything that he's done wrong, therefore he must have done all the things wrong himself. Like, ridiculous logic and like this crazy way of looking at stuff. I mean, some of these people, forget Arteezy, forget Kurogi, some of the people involved in this situation, I get it that some of them are just blowing off frustration and maybe they had a bad day, or maybe this is what they do for fun. They just get a little adrenaline boost by just fucking a thrill by just raging at people or just being a cunt to people online. But okay, that's true. But at the same time, some of these people need to grow the fuck up as well. The same people who are like, that guy's a piece of shit and an asshole, and wow, how could he behave that way? And he should be kicked from the scene and all this. Yet you're doing negative behaviour yourself right now. The sort of shit that apparently that guy probably didn't even do as bad as you. You're now doing it yourself to that guy. But well, that's justified, is it? Yeah, but I'm not a pro player. Like, yeah, but it's the same thing, mate. We're all humans and you're doing equally negative shit to some degree, or worse. So it's a pretty complicated topic. It's not even something I necessarily do bemoan. Like, I think it's just something that you have to be aware of, look at, and then as a result, you can maybe take some distance away, look at past cases of these talented teenagers, talented young men who are trying to figure out, by the way, I'm actually quite sympathetic to their case, trying to figure out the problems of the scene and how to cope with fame and how to have this level of talent, but understand what sort of a team they need around them to make that talent work. And is it my fault? Is it my opponent's fault? If a player is worse than me on a team, am I supposed to be more important than them? All these problems to figure out, because it's part of being a man adapting to society, and we have a very unique Western society in this sense in terms of how it's advanced differently, not advanced in terms of better, but it's just moved along differently from some of these. For example, part of the positives, there are negatives as well, by the way, of the Asian scene in that sense, come from the Confucian society they're a part of, and there are intense negatives to that as well, just certain extrusions that seem positive viewed in this context. So I think it's an interesting topic. That's the thing. It's mainly to make points and give food for thought. It's something I've thought about a lot myself to make the video, like the way this particular thing is and what we can maybe do to attenuate some of these issues. It's not that we can fix them, not that we can just turn someone's hormones off and make them not be angry about something or upset. It's not even that I'm saying they shouldn't rage or they shouldn't trash talk, 'cause I like that to a degree if someone wants to engage in it. I'm about freedom of expression. But there's ways as teams and players and as a scene that we can just be a bit more rational, a bit more reasonable about how we deal with this stuff. So cheers to Offer Draft for the money.